How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 3 of What If Deku Had Crazy Diamond. And now, let's begin. Good. All of you are here on time. That's great. As I hope all of you have been preparing for your field trip today to the USJ, otherwise known as the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. It's going to be a hellhole worth of training, so I hope all of you have prepared your minds mentally and physically, of course, as you're going to need that preparation. So now, please all go put your hero costumes on, and then we can head on to the bus. So, if any of you are late, we're just gonna leave you behind. There's no use for late people in the hero world. As Aizawa would then step outside of the classroom, he would then slowly begin a walk down to where the bus bay was, so he could just stand there waiting for his class to arrive. However, he would see many of his class rush right past him, trying to get to the locker rooms to put on their hero costumes first. However, there who would catch up to him would be Izuku, Doria, as he just couldn't care less if he was late, to be honest, as he was going to get to the USJ one way or another, and Aizawa just telling him he's just not gonna wait for anyone. That's simply not the case. Sure, this is a hero school and teachers get some more freedom than they would in a normal school, but Aizawa can't just leave one of his students for being a couple seconds late. That's just not going to happen. So as Izuku made it down to the locker room, he would get change in the empty and silent locker room, as many of his classmates had made it to the bus bay before even Aizawa had. So as Izuku puts it on, he would then rush off to the bus bay, slowly walking, as everyone would be sitting there, waiting for Izuku to get there. As Aizawa would look down onto his watch, as Izuku would slowly stroll up. Right on time. That's quite good pace, Izuku. You didn't have to struggle or waste any of your breath or energy on this. It's actually something that'd make a good hero, and not wasting something on useless things, even though you could have made it here on time without running and wasting your energy that could have been used on saving someone. So class, why don't you try to be a little bit more like Izuku here, not rush everything? As after this, since many of the teachers knew that there was going to be a field trip, if they hear you running again, you could possibly get detention. And since this is supposed to be a very well-off school and an educated school, if you get caught running twice, you get expelled. So I suggest let this be your lesson and not run in the halls again, as that could just lead to your termination from this hero school. Well, now let's hop onto the bus and go to the USJ, shall we? As all of them would pile onto the bus, as it would then speed off towards the massive dome building. Once it would arrive, it would slowly pull up to the building, where massive steps would lead up towards the doors, as all of the UA students would get out before Ito would direct them into a line, as they would then walk up all of these stairs towards the doors, where Aizawa would then stand in front of them before directing them to 13. 13 here is a rescue hero along with the caretaker here at this USJ building. So I suggest you all pay attention and listen to her while she gives the instructions. Welcome, Class 1A, to the USJ. So let's begin with introductions here, by letting you all see what the USJ is like. As 13 would then open up the USJ, many of the students would marvel at it, how big and massive it looked. Sure, it looked big from the outside, but on the inside it was huge, far bigger than anyone had even thought it was. So as everyone was just staring around at the massive circular-shaped building, as they were all inside of it, something strange would happen, as a small purple orb would then form in the center by the fountain. Many of the students, including the teachers, would spot it, as it would then spiral out of control, turning into a massive circular shape. But it wasn't sort of like the USJ. It was a flat circle, as many villains started to pile out of it, although many people didn't know what was happening. Whoa, they even have fake villains here? That's insane! Many of them would think, one of them even screaming it out. However, Aizawa would then put his arm out in front of them before yelling at them to rush out of the doors, as this isn't fake villains. This is a real villain attack. Many of the students would get just scared, not having never encountered a real villain before in their life. Many of them would be paranoid, not knowing what to do. Many freezing up, just staying still. Some of them rushing towards the door before that same purple disc sort of thing would open up before yellow eyes would appear. Oh, stop there. I can't have you all leaving now, can I? That's something the boss wouldn't really enjoy, having a bunch of brats escape when they could be destroyed. So why don't you stay here and be kind to yourselves and not be destroyed by one of my portals here? As the purple portal thing would be talking, would then disappear, appearing right back to where the center of the fountain was. As villains surrounding all of them, there was three standing in the center. The portal thing, of course, a strange teal blue-haired person, and a massive bird with tons of scars all over it. Many of the students didn't quite know what was happening, even after Aizawa told them it was real villains. As Shigaraki would then exclaim, "Ah, welcome, UA. Would just like to introduce myself. I, along with the rest of these villains, are known as the League of Villains, and they're gonna be the last thing you'll see. Just know you'll never see your families again. Only the villains and people inside this dome. I've had some villains secure the outside for me, so even if you escape, you'll be fried into tiny little particles of dust. So he suggests don't even touching the handle of the door." As many of the students would just look on in shock, as a portal would then open up with them. "Now I'll have my portal guy, Kirigiri, split you up for me. It'll just make it easier to deal with you all instead of having to deal with you in groups. Now, Kirigiri, why don't you do the honors?" As Kirigiri would open up a portal underneath them, dispersing them across the USJ. As Izuku would be falling under there, as he would then make his stand appear, hopefully trying to use some punches or something to hopefully lessen the blow. However, Shigaraki would, looking around, seeing all the villains or all of the students fall down just from the portals, as Izuku would be one of those he had saw. As Shigaraki sees Izuku falling down, he would then see Izuku open up his stand or use his stand in trying to use a punch. He would realize, oh, so one of UA's brats has a stand. They're a stand user. "Kirigiri, won't you be a dear and bring that stand user to me?" As Kirigiri, seeing it as well, would then bring Izuku towards him by putting a portal under him, as Izuku would then fall through the portal once again. However, before Izuku could even react or do anything, a grip would then suddenly be placed around his neck, as Shigaraki would then stop Izuku from breathing, choking him. As Izuku would go to grab Shigaraki's hands, as Shigaraki would just tell him to stop. "So it appears the stand users in UA. That's quite cool. And I think you might not have known there's quite a few stand users out there, and it's not just you. Just letting you know. However, most of them happen to be on my side. You're one of the strange few that have decided to become a hero with your crazy ability. It's quite strange, in fact. Well, how about this? I know how to deal with the stand user, so why don't you come with me? Kirigiri, open up a portal to it. I'll have some people in the dungeon lock him up for me." As Shigaraki would then drop Izuku, as a portal would then open up beneath him. "You could make an excellent Nomu, or maybe even one of our ranks. Just know, if you never join us, you'll become much like this guy right here." As the Nomu would look down, just blank eyes staring down at Izuku, completely devoid of all life and thoughts. As Izuku, not wanting that to happen, would summon his stand, now having his lungs filled back with air, grabbing onto Shigaraki's leg in a very tight grip. "Oh, it appears you have a little struggle in you. That simply won't do." As a yellowish stand would appear right behind Shigaraki. However, Shigaraki was not quick enough, as Izuku had propelled himself up far above Shigaraki, as he had propelled himself out of the portal. Now, above Shigaraki, he would have his stand wind its fist back before it would cry out, going for a punch towards Shigaraki. However, before anything could happen, Shigaraki would then laugh. "Foolish brat. Don't you know not to play with your food?" As Izuku would turn around to see that Shigaraki was now behind him. "It's a shame that you're so weak. You'd need a lot more training to even be able to join our ranks." It's a shame, really. As Izuku would then fall to the ground, as he would see Shigaraki about to step through a portal. Nomu, kill all those brats from UA, don't you? Before Shigaraki would then disappear into the portal, the Nomu would glare down at Izuku before jumping into action, grabbing Izuku's neck, slamming him down into the concrete below him. As Izuku would then gasp for air from the strangling hold of the Nomu, he would be able to kick free of it, as there, standing in front of him, was a mindless, lifeless thing that only had one goal in life, and that was to destroy him. Izuku, now having the threat of his life being just gone, so he decided to take things a little bit more seriously. Rushing towards the Nomu, Izuku's stand Crazy Diamond would then start a rapid of strange punches going right at the Nomu. As the Nomu would then look on towards Izuku before something strange would end up happening. As Izuku was punching the Nomu, it would slowly move back and back until it hit the fountain, completely shattering it. However, before anything could happen, Izuku would also punch the fountain as he would start to fuse the Nomu into the fountain, as it would then become entrapped within it, as it would look on towards Izuku just with blank, soulless eyes, not able to move at all, as the fountain now just had eyes staring on at it, with the fountain just having nothing on besides new eyes. As the Nomu was now gone, being fused into the fountain, Izuku would look over to see Aizawa slowly crawling out of the water, starting to cough up blood. Izuku would rush over towards him before he would end up seeing Aizawa's just sitting there before looking down at Aizawa's chest. A massive bruise had already started forming as Izuku started to connect the dots. Aizawa must have been punched by the Nomu right in the stomach, sending him flying into the water zone, and he probably started to drown drinking up water. As Izuku would tell Aizawa or ask him if he was okay, Aizawa would just shake his head before passing out. Izuku would look up to see 13 holding back many of the students who were wondering what was still going on. As 13 would then rush down the stairs with the students following right to Aizawa before telling Izuku that she'll take care of Aizawa and that she saw what he had done and that he should go on and try to fight many of the villains there, as she just has a rescue quirk, or useful for that, and she'd basically hold no use for him if he went on to fight alone. As Izuku would take on some of the students there, one of them being Todoroki, they would then go around looking for people that they could save, mostly being just their classmates. So they would go around saving many of their classmates, also encountering Bakugo, who would shrug them off, not wanting to even bat an eye towards them, going off to do his own things, bashing villains' heads into the ground, most likely. So as Izuku was just running around, he would end up hearing just a police siren and sirens off in the distance. He would look on to see where it was, as along with his group, would rush off towards the front of it, where they would meet 13, holding off from many of the students that were still there, or had found their way there, from exiting the door. I know what that villain said. He said if any of us try to leave, we'll probably be killed. Said that there's some sort of red thing around it that could kill us if we even touch one of the doors. As they could all hear the sirens of police cars outside of it, as All Might would end up rushing to the scene. 13 would yell for All Might not to touch the red or whatever barrier that they had saw, as a red light was just going in through the windows, as it made a very eerie feeling throughout the USJ. It was as if the sun and the sky had turned red, and it was just beating down on them, as 13 would yell for him not to touch the barrier, as it could possibly kill them, as Izuku would step forward, punching the door, shattering it, as there stood the barrier between Izuku and All Might. Izuku would step back, as All Might would stand there, looking on through the barrier. It's okay, class, I'll save you all. Before any of them could even realize, All Might would wind back his fist, going to punch the barrier, As he punched it, his fist would then just dissolve right into the barrier, as All Might would look on to see that his entire arm had started to deteriorate into dust, as All Might would look on in shock before he would then pull out a knife, cutting off his arm before it could even reach his upper shoulder. And this worked. It stopped All Might from having just being destroyed, as All Might there stood his decaying arm on the ground, as many of the students watching would just be in complete shock. What the hell is this thing? As many of them were unsure what could be happening, as one of them, or All Might, would end up hearing rustling from the bushes behind them, as one of the police officers would then go back to investigate, where they would find someone sitting in the bushes, laughing at All Might. I managed to hurt the #1 hero. That's quite the accomplishment after all. I'll probably get some credit for this when I go back to the league. Oh, so it was your cork that did this to me. Well, no matter. If you can't reverse it, how about I do the same thing to you? As the villain would stare on at All Might just in complete shock, begging for All Might not to hurt him, as All Might would wind back his last arm that he had left, going to punch the villain, as the villain would then flinch before All Might would laugh, knocking him out. All Might would then rush off towards the UA facility so that he could ask Nezu for a support course member to create a prosthetic arm, hoping to keep it under wraps that he had gotten one of his arms just chopped off, as if villains were to find this out, it could possibly mean disastrous consequences for him in the hero world, mostly them seeing, someone was able to destroy All Might's arm, then maybe he's not so powerful after all. So as he rushed off, the red barrier would just be destroyed after knocking out that one guy, as all of them would rush out towards the police officers, where ambulances would have been there already, as paramedics would then start to be asking them all sorts of questions. As they would be asking all sorts of these questions, they would then be told that they are going to be escorted back to the UA classroom. Once they would arrive there, Midnight would walk into the door, looking down sad. Aisawa had to go to the ER and the hospital due to some of his injuries, but she would try to let this not get to her so that the students wouldn't know this. Well, your teacher had to go do something, mostly doing paperwork or something, I don't know. But basically, you all are let go for the day and possibly even a week. I'll see you all back in a week or so now. Please don't tell anyone about this, as it could mean disastrous consequences for UA, and you may even be pulled out by your parents. So if you still want to become a hero, please try to keep this just secure and not talk about it. As all of these students would nod their heads, not wanting their dream job of being a hero taken away by their own parents for their own safety. So as a week would end up passing, they would all tell them that they were doing upgrades and that they couldn't really be in the school building. Well, many of them would just come up with random lies, as that was what their parents just went with. So as all of them would be returning to school the next week, they would all be sitting down as Midnight would then walk in. Well, your teacher's still stuck in a paperwork hell, so I'll be your teacher for the next couple of days. So anyway, why don't you all start with your, let's see here, your class representative. Yeah, the first year class representative. Who should it be? As many of them would then start to be talking around, as Midnight would then ask anyone who wanted to come up and speak. Ida would then come up, speaking that he wishes to become the class rep so that he could just be a better person in whole and making the class a safer place. As Ida would then sit down, all of the students would be handed whiteboards to write the name of the person they wanted to vote or they wanted to be class rep on would then go up. Izuku would write down Ida's name, just thinking, if he wants to be class rep, then okay. However, after everyone wrote it down, they would all lift up their boards as Midnight would then start counting. Well, it appears Izuku has a stunning odd of getting around, I would say, A majority of the class, around three-fourths of them, voted for Izuku. Ida would put his head down, just wondering, why? As Izuku would then hear that Ida had been elected as the just assistant class rep. Izuku, as the class representative, would come up before saying that he's honored to be your class representative, but he would then ask someone, why? Why would you all vote for me even though Ida clearly wanted to become it? As they would just say, um, well, you showed great leadership, I guess, when you saved us all from the USJ. That's really what I was thinking, at least, as this would be Momo Yorozu talking, as she would then sit down. Izuku would nod his head in understanding before going to sit back down in his seat, wondering what was going to happen next. And that is where this What If is going to be left off. Part 4 coming out tomorrow. Unless you are watching this in the future, then it's already out. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.